Welcome to the American Woodshop. I'm Susie Phillips.
And I'm Scott Phillips.
And I challenged Scott to transform this trivet into a beautiful picnic basket.
So using her ideas, you'll learn how to create the ultimate picnic basket with us today, Shaker inspired. If you stay with us, don't go anywhere.
The American Woodshop with Scott Phillips is brought to you by
Woodcraft since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Craig, from the first cut to the final assembly, providing woodworkers with products that help simplify woodworking challenges. Craig.
Gorilla Glue for the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
For dry hands that crack and split, O'Keeffe's Working Hands. Easy Wood Tools, American-made tools for all skill levels.
This multicolored wood trivet really inspired me to challenge Scott to do a basket.
Okay, and a picnic basket it is. And this is stringed together with heavy-duty fishing line and beads. And then the top is just a shaker tray. And you'll learn how to bend the handle and the band on the tray.
Neat. And look at that basket.
And it's beautiful wood, scrap wood. So it's off to the bandsaw to make this.
All right, get busy.
Now look at this beautiful walnut. And I have two main thicknesses, 1 3/4 inches and just a hair over 1 inch. And if some pieces here, in this case hard maple, this is Osage orange. And if you want it to keep this beautiful yellow color, spray it with whisk and let it dry for a couple of days before you put a finish on it. That helps preserve that yellow. And there's some red oak. And what I do is I take scrap wood and I just need one good straight edge. And what I can do is set up the bandsaw to make virtually all the cuts for this project. Now this bandsaw blade, look at this. Man, I'm really bearing down on that pressure, and it's a 1/2 inch wide blade, 4 teeth per inch, and that is stiff, and that's the way you want it. On the tension setting, that 1/2 inch blade is set at 3/4, and that's okay as long as at the end of the job, when it's turned off, you back the tension off. The other thing that's really important, that blade should be tracking on the center of the top of the tire and locked in place, and there's a lock right here where you make sure that that wheel doesn't vibrate loose. And then you bring these bearings up so the bearings support the side of the blade, gently kiss it, and lubricate those bearings with some sort of Teflon-based spray so it doesn't stay wet and draw the lignin in, which is the glue, which turns it into a paste wax. And then the thrust bearing right behind this, you need to take a look at this, because honestly, that's key. If you don't bring the thrust bearing up, right there it is, and support it right behind the blade at rest. And then as soon as you start to make that cut, it starts to spin. Well, that would create problems if it's not there for you. And you do the same treatment underneath the table as well, because if the bearings down there aren't adjusted to support the blade during the cut, you could roll the set of the teeth right off, and then you couldn't do all those wonderful cuts that you need. I have a great push block and an excellent push stick. And whatever you do, be sure to read, understand, and follow all the instructions that come with the tools and products you use in the wood shop. So, work safe, be smart. And what I'm going to do now is I'll strip down a bunch of pieces, and I've got a mark on the table that will be 5/16 of an inch in thickness. And to do that, I've got that locked in place. Got the dust collector on. Bandsaw's second dustiest tool in your shop, and we're ready to make those cuts. That's secure, the post is locked, we're good to go. Okay, now check this out. I'm going to use that push block to hold it against the fence. As I finish that cut, look at what I can do. Watch that blade, respect it. And then that's thick enough that I can sand that down later. I don't like to use a table saw for this because thin pieces of wood on a table saw can't get back. So I'll rip down all the material that I need with the thin strips. I'll turn that off, let that come to a stop, And that's how I make the thin strips, and I'll use this miter gauge later to cut it all to finished lengths. But while I'm set up with the rip fence here, the resaw fence, I'm going to move this fence over. So now I'm going to cut a thin strip that's 3/16 of an inch in thickness, and that's for the band that will wrap the oval tray, shaker inspired. And that needs to be 68 inches long and 5/4 in thickness. So I'll make those cuts right now. Again, a push stick or a push block to help secure that board against that fence. Now, turn that off. Let's take a look at that cut. Beautiful. That is perfect. And that's uniform. No drift. Now, if you're having drift on a bandsaw, you haven't put enough tension on it. And it's key, you have to use great blade. And that blade is a 1/2 inch 4-tooth silicon steel. I need to move that over to cut it to width, which is 5/4 inch and 1/4. And locked in, that's good. And I'll rip that down. And once I have that done, then we have a couple more things to do. The handle and the oval for the shaker tray. Now as I finish that cut, very important to keep that workpiece under control against the fence. And that's where this push stick comes in handy. Now turn that off. And dust collector's off. And if you look down here, you can see I've got some defects. So I'm going to drive in a line, and that I know is 68 inches long right there. And I'll ease the fence out. And the other thing I can do right here is 3 inches back. Here's a good scale right here. Mark that 3 inches back. And right on center and slightly down, I cut out part of a swallowtail. I lay that out. And you could use a template, but this is a swallowtail. That's what that profile is called. And that's so that can be tacked in gracefully, and it allows for expansion and contraction. So I'll just make that cut very quickly. Leaving the line. There goes the defect. Get that out of the way. And you can always stand down to it. Save that scrap wood, because once that's done, turn that off, hit the brake, and now what I can do is use that scrap to lay out the other part, which will be balanced of the swallowtail. So that being said, that's an easy way to get the band prepared for the oval top. Finish that, then it's on to the handle stock. And voila, there are the swallowtails. Nothing to it. Okay, I'll set that aside because we'll have to steam that and bend that later after we profile it. Now I have a beautiful piece of white oak here that isn't quite square, but it has a square shoulder here. And that way I can use this to make the handle parts, which are 57 inches long. And here I'll just use this scale to make sure that this piece that I'm going to resaw down nets out a hair over 5/8. And then once that's cut down, I'll square that or make a rectangular form to 7/8. So it's 5/8 by 7/8. Make those cuts. Remember, this is for the handle. White oak. Bends great. We'll speed bend this. Keep it against the fence as we make that cut. And keep it square. Biggest mistake people make, resawing, you get in a hurry. Take your time. Let that blade carry away that sawdust. That's very important. Okay, turn that off. So that's hair over 5/8. Now I move the fence over, so that nets out 7/8, and lock that in place. And I can resaw those strips down. Always like to bend 2 pieces. That way I can take the better of the two. And the handle work pieces will be 57 in total length. That looks good. I need to hand plane that down. But one final thing here to do at the bandsaw as that comes down. I'll use the brake to stop that. Did you know that more accidents happen on a bandsaw when it's coasting to a stop when people are reaching in? So be careful about that. Now, I've got an oval laid out here for the top on 1/2-inch birch plywood, which will take a beautiful stain to make it look like cherry. Why not use solid wood here? Because over time, especially on a picnic basket, it's going to be exposed to a lot of humidity extremes, so I want 1/2-inch plywood for that. All right, now I'll show you how to lay out ovals later in the show, but I'm just going to stay on the outside edge of this line right now of this large oval. Then we'll take the parts to the workbench and we'll tune them up. Now this benchtop sander has 80 grit abrasive on it, and believe it or not, after you use it for a bit, you get a super smooth finish off of that. And I need to use a bit of 100 and 150 on it later, but that gets it ready for me to take all 38 of the slats that I need over to the drill press. And I want to show you one thing. See how that 80-pound fish line, okay, that is what we use to draw it nice and tight. You'll never break it. And to do that, we have to drill these tiny 16th-inch holes in those wide and narrow workpieces. Off to the drill press. Once everything's sanded down here, I'm using a fence with a 16th-inch drill bit, and I have this set up so that whatever the width, look at how I drill this. This is at 1200 RPM, and I drill it until I'm just a little bit more than halfway through, flip it around. That bit is positioned when I hold it against the stop down here and the fence so that I can drill that hole and I can see all the way through it by going at it in 2 passes. That fine bit, if I tried to do this in 1 pass all the way through, it'd wander off, it'd follow the grain. So this is how you drill, or I drill, all the holes that I need in these slats in order to run the fishing line. So I'll get all these drilled out, and then from here the only other thing we have to do is a bit of steam bending. So after this, over to steam bending. All right. I've used an oscillating spindle sander to taper down these edges right here of that swallowtail. And that's ready to go into the steamer. On this end, it has to be feathered down to nothing, starting about 5 inches from the end. So when it laps back on itself, it creates a beautiful detailed joint. Okay, the other thing is I've got a piece of oak ready to bend just like that for the handle. And this thick piece will take about 20 minutes. The thin piece, about 10. with my steamer over here. And this is a wallpaper steamer supply. Watch that steam when you pull the end off. That's superheated. So I'll put the swallowtail in, fat end forward, and I'll put the handle piece in, up on edge, and I'll let that steam for 10 minutes for the tail, and then what we're going to do is bend that cherry around this plywood form. Okay, let it steam. 10 minutes has passed. This is what we're going to make by pulling carefully, watching the steam, the piece for the box. Remember, the fingers have to point that way, in the middle, out. And I need to bend this around while it's still super hot. I'm using a quick bench to hold it in place. And I have about 15 seconds before the lignin in the wood starts to get hard. And really, this is handy if you have 2 people to do this, or a great bench like this. So we swing that right on about around, and it's starting to get stiff. Oh boy, this is tight. This is good. No cracks yet. That's not what we want. We don't want cracks. And there we go. It's nice and tight to the form, centered up along the edge. And that's perfect because that's starting to cool down. So what I'm going to do now is close down the vise and the dogs, secure it, fish it tight, and then I can tack it in place once everything's tight. When nails do come through, the easiest way to finish them off are with these locking pliers, just like that. And that's an elegant look. Now I'll set that out of the way, very happy with that. Gloves on, and now this is my bending form. Dog down, and gloves are on, and we're going to fly. So here we go. We pull the workpiece out, bring it up, clamp it in place right here. Seconds really matter on this. And with white oak, it bends well, but you really do need to fly. Bring it in onto this curve and bringing it on around. That looks really good. Okay, all the way around, just like that. And she works beautifully. That's good. So I'll bring one up on the top, clamp it in place, and then one across the bottom, and let that cool down. And after it cools down for half an hour, we can assemble the rest of the project. I'm using a dye stain to change that plywood, birch plywood, to cherry. And it's water-based, and I also put a nice amount onto the cherry banding. And when this is done and when it's dry, you can't tell the plywood from the cherry. And then once this dries according to the instructions, I'm also going to wipe out gunstock oil on the lid, because remember, this is a picnic basket, and I want something that can hold up to the weather, and that fills the bill. So I'll get that wiped out, let it dry, and then from there, we start to put the parts together. Now, those are sanded to perfection. Be sure to wear a dust mask and use a dust collector or extractor when you do that. And here's how those pieces, the slats to the basket, are all coming together. And what I do is I, along the top edge, run 80-pound fishing line through the slats, use the large printed wooden beads, jewelry beads, essentially from a fabric store, and alternate that and weave it all together. And once that's done across the top, I use the smaller beads along the bottom and weave those together. And then I knot it on the far end, and then it's on to finishing. Now, I draw that knot on the bottom tight, and I can cinch this all up just draw it tight, and then you can see the big beads at the top, the small beads at the bottom, can it at an angle, so when it stands up, it splays out. And to make that work, we need a bottom that is cut at a 5-degree angle over at the bandsaw. So the table there is tilted, and then we cut it out. Here's how. For the bottom of the basket, I need an oval, and that's going to be on 1/2-inch thick plywood, so it will be stable. And that oval needs to be 15.5 inches across and 20.5 long. And here's an easy way to make that oval, or any oval for that matter. You can lay out a template with the screws 13.5 inches screwed in to your template material apart. And then this is a non-stretching string that's 17.5 inches long. And I'll loop that around the end of the permanent marker and keep it tight. And what you can do then is lay in that template all the way around. And once you have, what happened there? Once you have that template laid out very nicely, like that, you can cut that out on the bandsaw and use that template to lay out successive patterns, in this case on 1/2-inch stock. Now to cut that out, I'm using a 1/2-inch blade with 4 teeth per inch, and I'll stay on the outside edge of the line. Once we make this cut, it's over to the workbench to put all the parts of the basket together. Okay, here's the oval base, and now you know how to lay it out. And I did have the table tilted at a 5-degree angle, so this bevel is out like that, so that when I take this pre-finished glue up, and here you can see how I've got it knotted, okay, and that will lap all the way back around, and that will be joined together with nails. But here's how this goes. You tilt this up, and this is gunstock oil on this, and it took a good 3 hours for this to dry, and I want to bring this all the way around to this far point right in there, and I draw this tight around the base with a 38 slats, and once that's done, I pre-drill the pilot holes right through here, and I use ring shank copper nails to make that fast. And once that's tacked in, about every 4th slat, or stave, as this would be called, is nailed into the base. And from there, there's a really neat way to finish the top. So 2 ring shank steel copper-coated nails per slat, every 4th one. And you can see that really draws that all together. That's beautiful. Okay, and then what will happen is the oval tray actually becomes the lid to this, and we have to connect the handle to each end. And before I do that, I need to use a spoke shave to knock the edges off, make it comfortable in the hand. And once that's done, I just screw it on. I use finishing washers and make sure the screw goes into the plywood through the band. And then I can position that so it locks onto the lid. And then I'll use this step bit to drill counter holes for these stepped dowels that will lock the lid onto the edge. It's all looking good. I have all the parts locked together now, and the stain has dried, which is very important. Do not apply a finish on top of a stain that hasn't cured completely. And look at that. I defy anybody to get a better cherry look than that. That's just nice, out of the birch plywood. And it will be stable in time. And so that's looking really good. I love the way the Miller dowels that are stepped lock this lid to the base. And then I just need to wipe out the handle. And the other thing is, this is a very elegant look. I love it all, every bit of it. And so there you have it, a unique, in all the world, picnic basket that Susie challenged me to make. And you have a storage tray right there for whatever you want to go out and picnic with. So that's a wonderful project from the American Woodshop. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And that's using scrap wood the very best way. Now next week, on to a beautiful scroll saw antique shelf that will enhance any home. See you next time.
Woodcraft, since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Craig, from the first cut to the final assembly, providing woodworkers with products that help simplify woodworking challenges. Craig.
Gorilla Glue for the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
For dry hands that crack and split, O'Keeffe's Working Hands. Easy Wood Tools, American-made tools for all skill levels.
For more information behind the scenes at the American Woodshop, go to our website for complete details on tips and like us on Facebook.
Away we'll go on the